evening. I'm Errol Lewis, national political anchor for Spectrum News. You're watching a special report on Spectrum News following yesterday's assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. It is 8 p.m. in the nation's capital, where President Joe Biden will be delivering an Oval Office address in just a minute. It's only the third such address of his presidency. And it's 7 p.m. in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Donald Trump is now arrived in advance of the Republican National Convention, which kicks off tomorrow. Let me bring in Josh Robin. He is Spectrum News anchor and chief national political reporter live in Milwaukee. And Josh, this assassination attempt has changed the dynamic of this campaign, hasn't it?
It has, in practical ways. First, I'll start with the security here at the RNC is a lot tighter, a lot quicker than we expected. Number two is really the political, the existential political, if I can say. This really stresses the stakes. The current president is trying to convey calm and unity. The former president, as you mentioned, is here. He arrived in Milwaukee, and he's trying to convey strength and resilience. He actually believe is out to dinner here in Milwaukee. Errol.
Okay, we're still piecing together a lot of the facts, but we're going to go right now to Washington, where President Biden is speaking. Let's listen in.
My fellow Americans, I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victims who was killed. Corey was a husband, a father, a volunteer firefighter, a hero, sheltering his family from those bullets. We should all hold his family and all those injured in our prayers. Earlier today, I spoke about an ongoing investigation. We do not know the motive of the shooter yet. We don't know his opinions or affiliations. We don't know whether he had help or support or if he communicated with anyone else. Law enforcement professionals, as I speak, are investigating those questions. Tonight, I want to speak to what we do know. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed while simply exercising his freedom to support the America. We've traveled before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer. Whether it's with members of Congress of both parties being targeted and shot, or a violent mob attacking the Capitol on January 6th, or a brutal attack on the spouse of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or information and intimidation on election officials, or the kidnapping plot against the sitting governor, or an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. There is no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record of this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high. I've said it many times. The selection we make in this election is going to shape the future of America and the world for decades to come. I believe that with all my soul. I know that millions of my fellow Americans believe it as well. And some have a different view as to the direction our country should take. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, a God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace. All of us now face a time of testing as the election approaches. And the higher the stakes, the more fervent the passions become. This places an added burden on each of us to ensure that no matter how strong our convictions, we must never descend. The Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of a would-be assassin. You know, the path forward through competing visions of the campaign should always be resolved peacefully. You know, we're blessed to live in the greatest country on earth, and I believe that with every soul, every power of my being. So tonight, I'm asking every American to recommit, to make America, think about it. What's made America so special? Here in America, everyone must be treated with dignity and respect, and hate must have no safe harbor. Here in America, we need to get out of our silos, where we only listen to those with whom we agree, where misinformation is rampant, where foreign actors fan the flames of our division to shape the outcomes consistent with their interests, not ours. Let's remember, here in America, while unity is the most elusive of all goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this. You know, from the beginning, our founders understood the power of passion. So they created democracy, reason and balance, a chance to prevail over brute force. That's the American we must be. An American democracy where arguments are made in good faith. An American democracy where the rule of law is respected. An American democracy where decency, dignity, fair play aren't just quaint notions, but living, breathing realities. We owe that to those who come before us, to those who gave their lives for this country. We owe that to ourselves. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Look, let's never lose sight of who we are. Let's remember we are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
You just heard President Biden call for unity, saying that we should resolve our differences at the ballot box and not with bullets. National unity and for a turn away from the violence that we saw yesterday on the campaign trail. He said as well that former President Trump, although an adversary, is in his prayers, and that he's urging the rest of us to do likewise and to make sure that we keep this a peaceful arena for debate, not a battlefield, he said, and certainly not a killing field. Let me bring in Cassie Semien, who is live at the White House. And Cassie, this is only the third time we've heard from the president since the assassination attempt. Rare Oval Office address just now. What's your reaction to that?
Well, this was a very big moment for President Biden. As you mentioned, only the third Oval Office address of his presidency, really showing that this was a moment he felt he needed to address the American people from the Oval Office behind the Resolute desk, a very powerful image. He really needed to talk to Americans tonight, not just those who will not vote for him in November. His message to the American people was to turn down the rhetoric and a reminder that we should never let politics get to violence. He's named a number of times over the last decade where we've seen political violence against members from both parties, from the congressional baseball shooting in 2017 to the January 6th attack on the Capitol to the attack on former Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul. All of these are instances of political violence where the rhetoric has gone too far and driven individual actors or a group of actors when it came to January 6th to speak out, act out in favor of certain political beliefs. And he was saying in this moment that we need to get away from that. We need to really get back to the core of who we are as Americans, that we are allowed to disagree politically, but we need to let the violence go. We need to bring the temperature down in this country. And that's exactly what he was trying to do tonight with this speech. He's going to hit the campaign trail later this week. The RNC expects Trump to attack his record, just as Biden will attack Trump's record, but that it should never get to violent rhetoric, and he's going to stay away from that as well.
And so, Cassie, while the president is going to hit the road, our understanding is that he's no longer going to be traveling to Texas tomorrow. What are some other changes to his schedule, and are they because of the shooting?
Well, there's definitely some sort of scheduling change due to the shooting. That's undeniable. He will no longer travel to Texas, to the LBJ Library in Austin, as you mentioned, and he will still do the NBC interview scheduled with Lester Holt, but instead of having that conducted in Austin, he will do that from the White House. He will then travel to Las Vegas for an event that was scheduled, but the rest of the week is still up in the air, according to the West Wing, and that could change depending on how the week progresses. But the White House has been very conscious of how they are approaching down their advertising. The Biden-Harris campaign pulled down their advertising attacking Trump and his record in the wake of that shooting on Saturday. It's unclear when those ads could go up or when traditional campaigning could begin again from the Biden-Harris side of things.
Okay, thanks very much, Cassie. We're going to check in with you again a little bit later. Right now, let's get an update on what we are learning about the shooter and the victims and the investigation. Joining me now, we have Spectrum News criminal justice reporter Dean Meminger and Victoria Halakar, who is live in Butler, Pennsylvania, where the shooting took place. And Victoria, what are we learning about the dead man, the shooter, who aimed and took fire at the former president yesterday?
Well, we're slowly but surely learning more about his background. There are still a lot of questions that remain unanswered, but we know he was a 20-year-old from Bethel Park, about an hour away from here, south. 30 minutes south of Pittsburgh. That's been a question a lot of people have asked. He's technically a registered Republican, but in 2021, according to campaign finance records, he donated $15 to a Democratic-leaning organization. So where he lies there, not exactly clear. We did also hear today from some of his high school classmates. They said he was bullied a lot. So we're not exactly sure how that might have played into things, but as far as the investigation knows, we know from the AP, they said that investigators found bomb-making materials not only in his house, but also in his car, which was parked outside of the rally. And apart from that, we're still piecing things together about why he may have committed this act.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. And Dean, what are we learning about the investigation so far?
Well, you know, they are continuing to investigate, and we just heard from the president, and that's the latest news. No motive, according to the president, everyone, and they say they do not know if he was affiliated with any group that promoted violence and if anyone helped him out. Now, we do have another photo of the 20-year-old who is from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. He was a nursing home employee, and they are continuing to speak to his family and his friends to try to figure out what they may know. But so far, the FBI has not found anything in his social media or in his computers or his writings to lead them to believe why he did something like this. Why did he go to the rally and try to assassinate former President Donald Trump? Now, you know, the FBI continuing to investigate. They are talking with local law enforcement officials. This young man, 20 years old, does not have a criminal record, according to public records. The DA in that area said they did not know of him, but they are continuing to investigate and working with the FBI as well. And now, this is interesting. According to the investigation, and Crooks actually tried out for his high school rifle team, but did not make the team. But we do know he had an AR-style rifle, fired that shot from about 164 yards away, and that is the length of a football field and a half away. But someone who is a good shot, has a long gun, they can make that sort of shot.
And Dean, I know concerns have been raised about the Secret Service and whether or not they established a proper perimeter and I guess really sort of secure the area such that something like what happened yesterday was not supposed to happen.
Yeah, this was outside of that rally zone, but a lot of people were standing outside of that area as we look here at a diagram, and there are reports of people saying that, you know what, they saw the guy on the rooftop and they were pointing to officers and Secret Service, hey, there's a guy up there with a gun. At one point, according to law enforcement officials, an officer did climb up on that rooftop, tried to encounter him, but the officer came down, and that's when 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks took that shot towards the president, killing one person, injuring others, and injuring the president as well. The president said he was hit by a bullet in the ear, but that's when the Secret Service took him out from another rooftop.
Okay, and if I can go back to Victoria for a minute, what's the sense there in Pennsylvania about whether or not this was kind of a local matter that the whole world has been watching, or was this, you know, outsiders who came and made some kind of a problem that wouldn't necessarily have gone on in that small suburban area?
I think this is something that is happening here at this local level, but it's reflective of issues that people are seeing across the nation. A lot of people who we spoke to on either side of the political divide said they're very concerned about the increasing amounts of sort of violent and comments out there that might be something that would lead to something like this. And so everyone that we've spoken to has called for more peace and more open dialogue when it comes to these issues, because nobody wants to see this happen again. And it very well could, because that's something that we see the conversation happening, not just in this local community, even though it's affecting this local community, but across the nation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you, Dean. Let's head out to Milwaukee to talk about security preparations there ahead of the Republican National Convention, which begins tomorrow. Our national political reporter, Taylor Popolars, is on the scene. And Taylor, will there be any security changes at the convention in response to the assassination attempt?
Errol, the short answer is no. The Secret Service that's been based here in Milwaukee preparing for this convention for the last 18 months held a press conference earlier today where they said flat out they remain confident in the preparation that's gone into this, and they're not making a single change. Now, mind you, there's a gigantic security perimeter here in place. You could see the black fencing behind me. We're about a block and a half from the arena where the actual convention will be taking place. Multiple streets are blocked off with fencing, concrete barriers. There's police on motorcycles, bicycles, officers standing at different checkpoints. And to get anywhere near the arena, you have to go through airport-style security. You have to have proper credentialing. There are dogs that are checking out equipment. So this is a very thorough security operation, and the Secret Service leader who is in charge of securing the Republican National Convention told the press today flat out that she is confident in the operation and they don't see the need to make any changes. It's also worth pointing out that here in Wisconsin, this is an open carry state, so there are a lot of gun owners who bring their weapons around with them. They're obviously not allowed to bring those weapons inside the security perimeter, but there's kind of renewed concern about that, given that somebody could get at least close to the security perimeter or what takes place there. But we've been here for the last couple of days and we've seen the security presence definitely be increased, and the fullest level perimeter was put into place a bit early after this assassination attempt on Trump. So it's been interesting to watch there, but other than that, no significant changes.
So if I understand what you're saying right, the plan includes allowing people to bring guns within blocks of the Fiserv Forum where the convention's being held?
Technically, yes, and the local Milwaukee leaders here talked about, obviously, the city of Milwaukee itself is a pretty blue city and democratic city where, you know, some people respect gun rights, but others want more gun control. And there were conversations at this press conference today where local leaders said we're kind of at the mercy of the state law here. And there was talk about whether the governor could maybe sign a temporary law to change that open carry rule in terms of the security perimeter. Secret Service and the local police chief were insisting that they feel confident that they'll be able to keep things under control. So you won't be able to get right up near the arena, but several blocks away, that's when the fencing ends. And in theory, people can bring weapons to that point.
Okay. We hope that you and everyone else will be safe there, Taylor. Let's bring in the rest of our panel. Spectrum News anchor and chief national political reporter Josh Robin is with us, as well as Spectrum News political anchors Holly Gregory, Tim Boyum, and Jason Fechner. And Jason, let me start with you. What has been the reaction from lawmakers in Milwaukee ahead of the RNC?
Well, so far it's all systems go, and it seems that both Democrat and Republican lawmakers, both in Milwaukee and across the state of Wisconsin, are moving things ahead as we move toward the RNC kicking off on Monday. Former President Donald Trump landing in Milwaukee about 2 hours ago now, and there has been a hope that he's going to stop at the big welcome party that's on the lakefront at the plan to shut that down throughout the course of the day. That interstate currently shut down, so whether or not he actually attends that kickoff event, stay tuned on that. The chair of the Wisconsin Republican Party also reiterating what the Secret Service, as Taylor mentioned there, had to say earlier, that they have full confidence in the plan that they have been working on for more than a year right now. So with all that in place, the stage is indeed set for the former president and Republicans to take the stage in Milwaukee over the next 4 days, obviously dealing with the fallout from the assassination attempt, but also putting their agenda on display to the rest of the nation right now and making that argument that they should re-elect former President Donald Trump to 4 more years in office come November. And we'll see how things go, obviously, in the months ahead.
And Jason, 4 years ago, it was during the pandemic, so it never happened. I remember I had to cancel my travel plans, but the Democratic convention was supposed to be there What's it like for Milwaukee to kind of be the center of the political universe these days?
And it was crazy back then during the pandemic that the DNC shifted to a virtual format, of course. The RNC full bore, as Taylor had mentioned, the streets all shut down. Everything is kind of ready to go. And you wonder how things would have been 4 years ago for Democrats here in Wisconsin, whether it would have made much of a difference. President Joe Biden won Wisconsin 4 years ago with fewer than 21,000 votes over former President Donald Trump. So kind of fascinating to see the dynamics of the political conventions play out and see whether or not they've got a big impact on the bottom line, of course, come November.
A true swing state. And Holly, Republicans, at least some that we were reporting on yesterday, have already begun accusing President Biden of inciting violence, claiming that his campaign rhetoric may have contributed or even led to this assassination attempt. I saw some references to a quote in Politico where the president said it's time to put Trump in a bullseye when he was on a private call with. He says that violent political rhetoric has been ticking up already since yesterday. Is there a plan, as far as we know, by the party to try and lower the vitriol?
I think that's been the conversation all day. You've certainly just heard, from President Biden, and you've heard from the former president himself saying or tweeting out, unite the country. You heard from the former first lady, saying, let's put, humanity above politics. It's so much greater who we are as human beings. So you've seen the messages of being united, which is very appropriate. We could all do some soul searching and how we speak to those who have different opinions than we do. But I would also argue that this moment itself, particularly, not just for the Republican Party, but for all Americans, there has been a moment here, and you're watching that moment as it unfolded live on television, where this could have played out a quarter of an inch different. You would have seen a former president being assassinated on collective sigh of relief that Trump did not happen. And in this moment, you saw true courage under fire. And if you can put politics aside, if you're not a Trump supporter, and just look at it for what it is for one moment, he could have stayed on the ground. There would have been no shame in that. He could have been carried out by Secret Service, no shame in that. But instead, he got back on his feet. He put his fist in the air and he said, fight. Fight. He wanted to show people that he was strong and he wasn't going to be kept down. And you heard the crowd respond, USA, USA. That was a moment, quite frankly, that transcended politics. It became an iconic American moment and display of courage of people and of a former president that will last for the ages.
What's your sense of whether or not that particular those acts by the former president, because there are others who went right to Twitter and began saying, this was a plot, this was a plan, this can be blamed on X, Y, and Z, even as we are waiting for the basic facts to come in.
To your point, we heard from J.D. Vance saying things just along that line. He could well be, a vice president pick. We heard from Congressman Matt Gaetz saying very similar things. So, yes, there's still a lot of anger. And if we look at this and we are honest with ourselves, we know that on both sides, the political temperature has been past the boiling point for far too long. However, there are signs that this is certainly uniting a Republican Party that wasn't in the doldrums that the Democrats were in lately, but was not fully united. I think that the Never Trump movement in that moment became extinct. And you see that Nikki Haley is now going to be speaking at the and also Governor Ron DeSantis, came out that he will be speaking as well. So the division within the Republican Party that was very much there, I think that got eliminated in that assassination attempt.
So let me go to North Carolina. Tim, do you think we'll see security changes at rallies around the country moving forward?
I don't know how we can't. I mean, I said this last night, it used to feel like you were in the safest place in the world when you were at a political event with one of the presidential candidates that had Secret Service, because there was so much attention and you felt so safe there. And last night, that was just taken away. And so, I think outdoor events are a whole different specter because of the ability to shoot from a long range, as we saw last night, and that was some 150, 160 yards. Some of these guns can go 300 yards or more with great accuracy. And so perhaps, these outdoor rallies, we might see more control over that. And I wonder about whether people are going to want to go to these events as much as they used to. I mean, that was a scary event for those people that were there. But they're really important in American politics to connect these communities to these candidates and get everybody excited and going. But if you're afraid you're going to get shot or there's going to be violence, I don't know if these American people want to go to these anymore. And so I think there's going to be a huge review. Is it going to happen through this cycle? I think there will be some immediate things probably when we maybe not see an outdoor event like that. But I think it's going to take some time to go through this process to see exactly what went wrong, potentially, and how that could be resolved in the future. But I think the fear factor is probably a bigger factor than the actual security at this point, potentially.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of rural rallies and get-togethers and state fairs and so forth in your neck of the woods, Tim. Yeah. And it really points to, we heard a lot of messages from a lot of people on both sides of the aisle saying thousands of people running for office. It's not just, the people at the top who are running for president, but there's a lot of exposure by a lot of candidates all the time.
Well, and it's not the rallies even beyond that. It's not the 10,000, 20,000 people that, in rural North Carolina that President Trump has been to. There are candidates that are running for mayor, for city council that are going door to door that they don't know what they're going to be opening a door to. The sophisticated campaigns with a lot of money, they know exactly what door they're going to. But a lot of these local politicians don't have the money to know exactly what door to go to. They're going to any door that they'll open to have a talk and a conversation. And the rhetoric out there is so rough right now, you think they got to be nervous. And I know we all want to think this is going to be a great moment where we all come together. I just don't know how it's going to turn out. We're seeing these statements made. We heard the president tonight. But social media has been a train wreck today. I'd argue it's worse today than it was yesterday. And where do we go from here? I don't know. I mean, in North Carolina, the Democrat state party reported that they, in one of their coastal communities, had rocks thrown through one of their offices last night. They had video or pictures of this last night. And even the reaction to that on social media was terrible about them making this up and whatnot. We still don't know the details, obviously, but at least for a short period of time, I think there's more concern about this getting worse before it gets better.
I hear you. Josh, what's your sense of what this shooting will mean for the Trump campaign? As Holly suggested, he almost seems emboldened in a way.
Yeah, I really agreed with what Holly was saying. The fact that Nikki Haley is going to be speaking here now, Ron DeSantis, his former adversaries, there's a lot of goodwill among Republicans that I think was somewhat here already with the RNC, but now it has really been turbocharged. I think one statement that's gotten a little bit of attention really doesn't seem to like politics all that much, to be honest with you. She hasn't been at these rallies. She hasn't been with her husband, the former president. But she had a very powerful statement that I think would be very that would get a lot of people nodding on both sides of the aisle, just talking about how these political figures are actually people, and that I'm not doing any kind of justice to her actual quotes, but that there needs to be more love and understanding within the world now, including the political arena. I think that a lot of people across the country really believe that. As for the former president, he has not come across with the same kind of tone as the current president. He has talked about unity. He has says that he loves this country. He has talked about no fear. But we haven't heard from him speaking. Obviously, that's going to change pretty soon. It will be really interesting to see whether he talks about that conciliatory tone to the current president. I mean, the former president himself, has been really criticized for his tone over the last number of years. That's nothing new. It's someone who is just the victim of an attempted assassination. But if we're looking at the whole process, yeah, we've called out what Biden reportedly said on one call, but the former president has said a lot of very incendiary things over the years, from the attack on July 6th to, cheering someone getting roughed up, to, telling people to fight like hell and so on. So there's been a lot of language from him. It's really overall a very incendiary time, and I fear, like you and Tim were just talking about, that people on social media will just continue to amplify this kind of vitriol that we're seeing.
Okay, thanks very much, Josh. If you're just joining us, this is Spectrum News special coverage of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. It is 8:31 on the East Coast, 5:30 on the West Coast, and it's 7:30 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where the former president just landed, arriving for the Republican National Convention, which will kick off tomorrow. We're talking about all things politics and the security that comes with it, since that is the question at hand. National Criminal Justice reporter Dean Meminger is with me right now. And Dean, when we look at what we have to try and do to maintain an open system, but also keep everyone safe, not just at the presidential level, but the thousands and thousands of people that are running for office, does this change the national conversation about that?
I think it changes it a little bit. You and I are here in New York City, and we recall a councilman who we knew, who was shot and killed in City Hall. And for a long time at City Hall in New York, they put screening stations up, police officers stationed there. But after several years, you know, they still do it, but people can still walk in. I think that there will be more security around the country for local elected officials and people running for office. But after a time, they kind of forget this sort of tragedy and what happened, not only to the former president, but to innocent people who were at that rally trying to support someone they believed in. Something
we should also keep in mind, as we heard from the president from the Oval Office about a half an hour ago, there's a lot that's still not known about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, including whether or not others may have been involved, whether or not foreign sources may have been involved.
100%. We're talking about the alleged shooter, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. One of the things we do know is that authorities found bomb-making material in his car, which was next to the rally. They also found similar materials in his home there in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. His family, they are actually cooperating with investigators, but they say they too are trying to figure out why their 20-year-old son did this. Now, the AR-style rifle that was used, it's believed that it was actually purchased by the 20-year-old's dad, but it's unclear how he got the gun from his father. Was it given to him, or did he take it without permission? And as of Sunday afternoon, the FBI saying they did not find anything on social media or in his writings yet to determine why he would do this. And as you mentioned, President Biden a short time ago saying that there was no motivation, but FBI believing that he acted alone.
Does the FBI have sort of an open call to people who may have more information? Are they looking for more information at this point?
100%. They have asked people to give them a call at their 1-800 phone number, or reach them online, or if you can get in contact with them locally at the Pittsburgh FBI headquarters there, to do so. But this is something that the FBI is heading, but they also want to be dealing with the local law enforcement. They are speaking to all of his friends. They are speaking to school staffers where he graduated from, and even he is described as a nursing home employee, speaking to people there to see if he said anything about wanting to commit this sort of violence.
And I guess finally, there were a lot of people who went on, I think, our cameras as well as others, kids who said they knew this person from high school, and that he was viciously bullied, which we know is one of the markers of people who can later turn to violence.
Yeah, 100%. That's what they say, that he was bullied almost every day. And he also tried out for the rifle team, but did not make it, according to kids who went to high school with him. And it's also interesting to find out really if he had any sort of mental health issues. Not an excuse for something like this, but this is something authorities will always look at to find out. A young person, why would they pick up a gun like this and shoot into a crowd, killing an innocent man and almost assassinating the president, Errol?
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dean. Let me go back to the panel. Actually, let me go to Taylor Popolars, who's there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And let's talk a little bit about the Democrats. You're there for the Republican National Convention, but let's remember there have been a lot of calls for President Biden to drop out of the race. Is that something that you think is going to come up during the RNC?
I wouldn't be surprised if it did, Errol, just because before this horrific event at the Trump rally yesterday, all that was being talked about in Washington, and as I was on the campaign trail over the last 2 weeks in several different states, was people on both sides of the aisle talking about President Joe Biden's debate performance and his age and abilities. There's almost 24 Democrats in Congress who have publicly called on Biden to end his bid for re-election because they don't think he's fit to serve another 4 years, which that alone is an unprecedented thing. Obviously, no members since the shooting took place yesterday have released statements talking about that. It'll be interesting, I think, to see on the Democratic side of the aisle, will that effort to kind of push Biden out now be muted or temporarily paused, or will it completely end because this assassination attempt was such a shocking moment and is kind of completely changing the trajectory of this race? On the Republican side, I could tell you I was at the former President Trump's rally in Florida earlier this week, or this past Tuesday, and time again, people that I was speaking with, the supporters that were there, were bringing up Biden's age, were bringing up the fact that they feel Trump is more with it and is stronger and is more energetic. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if, from the various speakers that we're set to hear from over the coming 4 days to the delegates who are going to be here and speaking with all of us and other members of the media, if that's brought up. And people are also connecting the images of Trump getting picked up from the stage after that bullet hit his ear and then that fist pump that Holly was talking about earlier. People are saying that's an example of where Trump, in our opinion, is strong compared with Biden, who people view, at least physically, is weaker than him. So it's definitely an interesting kind of change of events. I think for Democrats, it truly was all that was being talked about before the shooting yesterday. Now it's a question of how will it be talked about moving forward, and will there be additional pressure on Biden to make a decision about his re-election bid? And will Republicans try to kind of bring the programming back to that while also rallying behind Trump after he survived this assassination attempt?
Okay, let me thank you, Taylor. Let's go back to the White House, where Cassie Semyon is standing by. And Cassie, I imagine that some of those calls that we've heard for President Biden to step down and not accept the nomination to lead the party, some of that I imagine has got to be tamped down at this point. This would be a very awkward time to bring up some of those issues.
Yeah, the conversation has definitely changed on Capitol Hill here in Washington since that assassination attempt yesterday night. Congress isn't in session right now due to the RNC happening in Milwaukee, so we won't actually get to talk to lawmakers tomorrow night on the House steps or on the Senate steps like we traditionally would. But we have heard members from both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, condemning this violence against Trump, no matter how they feel about Trump personally, starting to see some of that unity. We've also seen some Republicans blame Biden and his rhetoric in recent days for this attempt on former President Trump's life. We don't know if that is actually the case or any inspiration for the alleged shooter, but we have seen still some of that partisan divide. But as Taylor mentioned, there's been over a dozen Democrats now calling for Biden to step aside from the top of the ticket. But plenty of Democrats that I have spoken with said they're riding with Biden, that they are strong in their support for Biden. They will not be unwavering or, fair weather friends, as one member put it to me in our conversation. So this is definitely changing the trajectory of the conversation that we've been having since the debate. But I don't know if we're going to be hearing from any members of Congress from the Democratic Party to call on Biden to step aside at this juncture as this latest turn of events unfolds.
Okay, thanks very much, Cassie. And Javi, let me come back to you. The chair of the House Intelligence Committee says that officials have to get to the bottom of what is being characterized by some as a security failure in Pennsylvania that allowed the shooting to take place. Hearings on that in the coming weeks. What's your sense of whether that's, I guess, in the burst and the shock of what happened, wanting to sort of maybe hold somebody accountable, as opposed to the politics of moving on and getting on with the campaign?
I can tell you there's a hunger for answers on this one, Errol. Congressman Michael Waltz, he's here in Central Florida, Republican. He's a Green Beret, so the only one in Congress who's a Green Beret, so security is well within his wheelhouse. He has major questions about how this happened, and he wants answers to it, and he has said that he has heard from the rank and file of the Secret Service, and they are furious with their leadership. He also claims that he has heard that they were requesting for months now more resources, more backup to cover this campaign, and that they did not get it from DHS. Now, DHS has said that that is not the case, but, you know, which is it? I don't know. They want to find out. But I will tell you this. If you look at what happened here, and I'm not pretending to be a security expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been to a lot of these rallies, and it just boggles my mind when you see that setup and you see in 2 football fields an elevated structure with a direct line to that stage, well within an easy shot for the rifle that he had. How on earth was that not covered? How was there not an agent on it, first of all, but how was it not seen there? And then you look at some of the video, the bystander video with cell phones, and those who were in the overflow crowd out in the perimeter, 3 to 4 minutes before the shooting saying, there's a man with a gun, there's a man with a gun. And also you see the video of the counter sniper who ultimately took that man out. It looked like he had a lock on something for a couple of minutes before the shooting happened. So I don't know. There's a lot to come out here, but was there an opportunity to take a shot and it didn't happen? I mean, those are all very legitimate questions. It certainly seems like there is a belief that this was a colossal failure. And whether we ever get to the bottom of it, that's another question.
Yeah, indeed. When asked about it, I noticed that at least one of the briefings, the FBI spokesman said, hey, that is for the Secret Service to answer. We're just here to figure out where and how the crime happened. But as far as their procedures and their protocols, they're going to let the Secret Service explain itself. Jason, let's talk some more politics. We're learning that Nikki Haley's now going to be speaking at the convention. She was not on the original list. What does that say to you? And where does the shooting fit into all of that, do you think?
Well, Errol, I was thinking about the unity aspect of all of this earlier today, and it's kind of hard to believe. Go back just a few months now, how unified Democrats seemed to be at the time behind Joe Biden's candidacy when you had Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis and the rest of the Republican field kind of slugging it out through the primary process. And now, following this assassination attempt, as we'd heard earlier, Nikki Haley set to be on stage. Initially, they had said that she wasn't invited to the RNC. Now, not only is she invited, she'll be speaking at the RNC. Ron DeSantis as well. So a very unified Republican Party. As for how this impacts the race going forward, here in Wisconsin, it's one of the 3 battleground states that the Biden administration has pointed to if they've got a shot at winning re-election. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all relatively within the margin of error. Here in Wisconsin, I think the latest average of all polls at RealClearPolitics.com before the assassination attempt, of course, was at around 2.6% that Trump was leading by. Now, it's a very small field of independent voters here in Wisconsin and in those other 2 battleground states as well. And earlier in the day on Sunday at an actual Wisconsin coffee shop, not one that you'll see on other networks kind of made up for the RNC over the next 4 days, I was sitting there listening to 3 people, and my 2-year-old son was with me. We got into a conversation with them over the 2-year-old son, and then we were talking about politics and the assassination attempt. I'd categorize all 3 as kind of lukewarm Trump supporters, and one of them had a very good point to me. She had said it's not necessarily the assassination attempt that could sway voters' minds in Wisconsin. It's what Trump does in the wake of it. And I've really kind of been keying in on that fact throughout the statements that Trump has made throughout the course of the rest of the day. A lot of these independent voters here in Wisconsin, they say that they don't like Trump, they don't like Biden. Maybe Trump has to change to a certain degree and kind of move that ball forward on the unity side of things when he speaks potentially at the RNC as early as Monday night out there. Maybe that gets some of those independent voters back on track, and maybe that kind of locks down a state like Wisconsin and locks up his chances come November as well.
Oh, very interesting. And actually, you know what, let me ask you this, Jason. I mean, I've talked with a number of strategists, and it turns out that when you talk with some of the Democratic strategists, what they're saying is that what they're worried about is not that there's a 2 or 3 or 4 point difference between Trump and Biden. What's got them alarmed and why people are calling for Biden to consider just jumping out of the race is that they say they've been spending a ton of money on advertising in states like yours, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and the president's numbers are not moving. What's your sense of that?
Well, there's some reporting out there that kind of that money that has kind of kept them treading water in these battleground states and kept these ad rates up right now, that money has dried up. And obviously there's a lot of reporting out there that some of these big ticket donor spenders out there are holding back millions of dollars from the Biden reelection bid right now. This was obviously before the assassination attempt, as the Democrats were kind of going through the turmoil of the last 2.5 to 3 weeks or so. But fascinating to see that play out. Can the Biden campaign get back on track, get this ad spending going again once they kind of stop this self-imposed pause in the wake of the assassination attempt? Can they get that going again? What's their message going to be? What's the tone of that going to be? And is all of that enough to kind of get them moving in the right direction to November? They have basically been plateaued for months now, and more or less Trump has been as well. He's got a real opportunity here to kind of get that post-convention bounce. And obviously we'll see if Biden can do the same if he's indeed the nominee come Chicago in November.
Okay.
Or rather in August, I should say.
Yeah, and Tim, as a matter of fact, when it comes to Biden's chances, he made a couple of high-profile trips, including one right after the debate, to North Carolina. It seems like despite not winning that state 4 years ago, he wants to maybe take another crack at it.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is the case. I mean, there was a lot of talk that, you know, the Biden campaign had spent a lot of money here in the past, but they were largely on ads. And they wanted money put on the ground. You know, a lot of Democrats were upset in 2020 that they felt like they lost because they felt rightfully so they should stay home because of the COVID situation. But you know, Republicans were largely out and about, and they feel like that made a difference. And there wasn't an investment in ground game. Well, this time there's a huge investment in ground game. We get press releases constantly from the Biden campaign about they have some 17, 18 offices open across the state. And at the time, former President Trump had no offices across the state, not a lot of campaign offices as well. But, you know, in between, you know, our shows here and on networks across North Carolina, there are Biden ads on constantly across the state. But to the point, what you guys were talking about just with Jason a minute ago, I mean, it is July 14th. I mean, most people don't pay super close attention until after Labor Day, and that's just the intensity of what's going on. And obviously, last night escalating that. So, you know, the question is whether just sort of this repeated pattern of these ads can make a difference in the long run. I don't know. But, you know, most North Carolina leaders have stood behind Joe Biden so far. I don't see that changing a lot. Things can change quickly, but boy, that discussion of him leaving the race has been shut off like a hose last night. And, you know, it may be over, the discussion to try to get him off the ballot at this point.
Okay, let's go back out to Milwaukee and Josh Robin. And Josh, what's the Republican thinking? What's the mood like out there? I remember being at Cleveland in 2016, and there was a fair amount of gloom and doom. People didn't know if they could get Trump over the line. I imagine they must be riding high at this point.
They are. I think there's a lot of concern, obviously, for his health. There's a lot of feeling that he is a hero for having the courage to get up quickly after he was shot and rallying the crowd. His picture, not surprisingly, is everywhere. His slogan, "Make America Great Again," is everywhere in the center here. And I think, frankly, the ones that I've talked to feel relatively good about his prospects right now for a number of reasons. You know, I think that there's going to be a surge of unity within the party, as we've talked about. And additionally, the problems with Biden are not going away. He's only getting older, and you know, he's never been one to really make a very convincing speech. I think what he said tonight will have people nodding. Certainly, they'll agree with it. But he has a real problem with his strategy, which is that, in my mind, before this happened with the assassination attempt, he would need to go really, really negative on Trump and just say that he might not be perfect, but you know, Trump is awful and he's going to end democracy and he's going to take away your health care and so on. And that makes having Trump survive this assassination attempt, it's going to be really difficult. It is only mid-July. Things tend to move quite quickly. But I think that Biden has to recalibrate right now. The way I see his recalibrating speech, his new platform going forward, is that he is going to talk about himself as a unifier, someone who can bring down the temperature. He'll obliquely, but he'll definitely mention that Trump has engaged in heated rhetoric in the past. In his speech there, he mentioned January 6, 2021. So, you know, we'll have to see how things change. And one last point, Errol, just what everyone is saying here. Yeah, I think that Trump could really pull ahead in this in a major way if he makes a speech that addresses everyone. He has very high unfavorables. So does Biden, but let's talk about Trump for a second. If he can make a speech that appeals to people and say that he'll be a president to everyone, and for some way he'll be listening to everyone going forward, that he wants more love and harmony in this country, that would probably go a long way. It doesn't really fit with his brand. It doesn't really fit with his DNA, but he just had a near-death experience. He also wants to win the presidency, so maybe he'll change.
Okay, very interesting. And Holly, what's your sense of the tone and whether it changes based on surviving this assassination attempt?
Well, I think what you just heard Josh say there, I think we're already seeing that reflect. I mean, nothing gets you down on your knees and literally thanking God faster than almost getting assassinated. And that is the first thing that we saw from the former president when he put out a message from his hospital bed, was to thank God. He showed, his humility there. It's a very humbling situation. As much as he stood up and showed courage, still, you realize, I was a quarter of an inch of a head turn a different way. And think how different this story would be. What if that had played out on national TV? I mean, we're not talking about a grainy Zapruder film from hundreds of yards away. We're talking about live television this close to the assassination, almost, of a former president and quite possibly the next president of the United States. So for him to have that moment, I mean, you would not be human if it did not change you in some way. And I think we have seen the former president in all of his messaging thus far. It's all been, through social media, showing that gratitude that he truly must feel right now. What will we see when he speaks? Will it be Thursday, or will he speak before that? We just don't know yet. But I think, Errol, it's quite possible that we do see, okay, I'm going to express my gratitude. I want to unite the country, and I'm going to do that. Could that be a different Trump than perhaps we've seen in the past? I certainly hope so. And I don't want to leave just yet until we mention the fact that Corey Camperatore, who was killed at that rally, that was an American who was exercising his First Amendment right to assemble and support his political candidate. This was not just an attack on MAGA, this was an attack on our political traditions. And this could have been a Democratic rally. It could have been, the other side that is dealing with this. The fact is, this was an American who goes to church every Sunday and who covered his family as those bullets were flying. And this was an attack on all of us. And I think we should all use this moment for some self-reflection and think about how we talk to people who may politically feel differently than we do. And I think you will see that reflected at the RNC.
I hope you are right about that. I know there was a GoFundMe effort that had a target of $2 million. I believe they've reached that amount already for the family of that unfortunate man who really just came out with his family to sort of take part in the best of America. Taylor, let's lay out for our viewers who may not be familiar with how conventions work, what we're expecting to see over the next 4 days.
Yeah, so these are 4 very full days. The Milwaukee Bucks Arena, called the Fiserv Forum here in Milwaukee, has been transformed into a large stage and a bunch of seats and signage for each of the state delegations that are coming. Tens of thousands of people are going to be here, over 50,000, and every single day there will be speakers who take the stage. The Trump campaign and the Republican National Committee has announced well over 80 speakers, and a lot of it is prominent Republicans. I was looking at a list that I have: Donald Trump Jr., and Eric Trump, the former president's 2 adult sons, Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News host who remains a very powerful voice within conservative media. Amber Rose is one of the more random celebrities who will be attending and speaking. She is a rapper and model who has interacted with Kanye West before. Several of the vice presidential shortlisters, if you will, who have been rumored as Trump's running mates are all slated to speak. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. So every single day and well into the evening, there will be speeches. There will be gatherings that each state delegation has breakfast in the morning, and then they have various meetings. The Republican delegates are also coming here to vote on the party platform that Trump and his running mate will be formally campaigning on between now and November. And then, as Holly was alluding to, at some point, or maybe potentially multiple points throughout the coming days, we expect to hear from Donald Trump himself. On Thursday, he'll formally accept the nomination and deliver a big speech. But given what happened yesterday, might he make appearances every single night? We know that he's here in Milwaukee now at a hotel that's not too far from where we are. So it should really be an interesting event because we still don't know who his running mate is. All of them potentially, at least the rumored ones, are set to speak. And Trump himself is here after going through an attempted assassination, and kind of the whole world will be watching what takes place now. Considering the fact that there was so much concern about Biden and his age before this, a lot of people thought, oh, the Republican convention will happen and we kind of know what will take place, no surprises there. Now everything has kind of changed, and the whole trajectory of how this week will play out is really up in the air, and we're going to be following it every single step of the way.
Prior to those shots ringing out yesterday, some of the thinking was that, well, it's Western Pennsylvania right near the Ohio border. Perhaps he's signaling or might even pop out at the rally, J.D. Vance from Ohio. What do you think of that?
I think Vance, from what I've had conversations with a lot of people within Trump world, and Vance is definitely within the short list. He and Trump are very, very close. I covered Vance's Senate race a couple of years ago. He is somebody who can really help the Trump campaign with Pennsylvania, Michigan, and here in Wisconsin especially. The big question is, does Trump want to share the ticket with a celebrity, or does he want somebody a bit more lower key?
Always a question with him. Thanks very much, Taylor. Thank you to the panel, and thank you at home for watching. I'm Errol Lewis. Make sure you stay with Spectrum News all week for comprehensive coverage of the Republican National Convention. Our Josh Robin will anchor from Milwaukee starting at noon Eastern, and then our primetime coverage will start at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we'll see you then. More news now on Spectrum. Stay with us.
Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
The 2024 election will decide who leads our nation and the balance of power in Congress, impacting all of us. From Capitol Hill to the Oval Office, let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth coverage with our dedicated experts in local politics. Strengthening democracy